Welcome to Digital After Dark with your hosts, Matt and Andrew.
Hello, and welcome back to another Digital After Dark. This is episode 10, where we're going to be talking about cookieless tracking with Ikshit. I'm here, as always, with Matt.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today, Ikshit.
Hi.
So today, we're going to do basic introductions, make sure everyone, the one listener out there, to understand who is Ikshit. Then we're going to go into what is this cookieless tracking, what are the benefits of cookieless tracking, what are the negative points of cookieless tracking, why and when do we need cookie for data collection, does the new PECR make this a moot point, and have a wrap up. So first things first, I think we need to introduce our one listener to you, Ikshit. So Ikshit, hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. So, I had been giving it a lot of thought how to start, where to start, what could be the intro, but I think the best intro is I met Andrew in 2013 when we were at Sky. And since then, I had been an enthusiast for all things marketing and data and tech. So that's how I progressed my career with working with different clients, different brands in different roles. Most recently around marketing tech, have done a lot of optimization, personalization, all those kind of things, which generally happen in e-commerce setting. So that's how my experiences have been. And for a very long time, I've been trying to uh, get on a podcast with Andrew because he has been posting so many things. So I'm pretty pleased to be on the one with him.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, Ikshit, during this whole time. So back at Sky, and I know that this is our second special guest on Shut Up Dark, both of them being from Sky. It is going to be a running trend, I will admit, but it won't be always. But no, definitely, Ikshit, you've already mentioned that you do want to be a recurring guest either on Shut Up Dark or my solo one, which is Andrew Talks. So we're definitely going to have you on quite often. But I did mention to Matt how you wanted to do around cookieless implementation, and Matt was like, "Yep, sign me up. I want to be on that one." So
Yeah.
anytime Matt's on, it will automatically become a Digital After Dark podcast.
This is true.
Super.
We've had one guest who wasn't ex Sky though, because we did the one with Rajesh the other day as well.
I honestly forgot that that one already came out, and yeah,
Don't tell
I
them.
think analysts from what used to be called Sky IQ, that was quite a posh team, like in the UK, probably European market, like super advanced, super intelligent people all across, and so much work, so much talent was there at that time. So I can relate when I see a lot of women, old colleagues, when I see their career paths. It has been fantastic to watch everyone progress. They all were uh, experts in their craft.
Yeah, everybody's been doing really well.
yeah.
I still have that T-shirt, which says Sky IQ.
I still have a lot of my business cards, but I was pre-Sky Q days. So I remember being migrated over to Sky Q where they had the flowchart of how everyone is going to fit in this new organization. And there was all this beautiful slide after slide. But when you get to the one with Gavin, who is our original director, it was
Mhm.
a dotted line in the corner, and that's where all the digital analysts were. Just right there in the corner, not connected to anything.
Yeah.
That's
I think,
the
but it was not like that. I think when I started, um, the framework was the embedded analyst framework. I was in product team, so anything to do with e-commerce and digital product was. I think each analyst was dedicated to one team, one vertical of sorts. It was there actually. You learn how how you can actually apply your expertise into day-to-day decision making, long-term planning, and so on and so forth. So that was good. In the charts, it did look like it's a team sitting in one of the buildings somewhere, but but yeah, we were there in all the discussions. That's what I could say.
Yeah, I mean, the way that SkyQ, SkyDS ended up becoming was significantly different than what it was at the very beginning, because at the very beginning, it was a company that Sky bought to be brought in, and they were traditionally an offline analyst, doing everything but digital. So it took a very long time until the person who headed up that organization who came to me and go, "Hey, what is this digital analytics?" So I talked about that on a Angel Talk podcast with Kevin, because that was one of my moments out of my career. I will always just remember him just coming up and asking me after 3 years being part of SkyQ, essentially asking, "What do you actually do for me?"
Yeah, what's your job?
But Andrew, if you can recall, we had this discussion like, should it be called digital analytics or web analytics? We had this discussion at that time.
So
Yep.
always digital.
Because my title was web analytics and conversion for Now TV, and in Sky it was analyst. But that was when we say web analytics, and I think Andrew at that time started calling it digital analytics because it was sort of digital analytics. We had yeah. So
Yeah.
that's something I recall.
Yeah, I mean, the moment that you put Adobe Analytics onto the Sky box, it no
Yeah.
longer is web.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my introduction to IoT as well.
Mm.
Was the tracking tracking digital signals on the Skybox. I always find that very fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Ikshit, thank you so much for joining us today and actually coming up with the topic.
Yeah.
So, what is this cookieless tracking?
Hmm.
So, Ikshit, I know that you're the one who came up with it. I did want to give you first go at what are your thoughts on it.
So I'm in a cookieless environment for some time now, and I've been hearing about this cookieless tracking for, I think, 2017, 18, that this is coming. Google tried few things and all the things happening. What happened is I moved working with a client, which basically had cookieless tracking of sorts. So I realized, okay, it was not that important. It was not something which could stop things, which could prove to be fatal for digital analytics per se. But things work. So there is another way. There is another side to it. So that was my curiosity, and I'm still curious about it. How uh, how it's going to evolve. So that's why the discussion is about. I was keen to kind of have this discussion with you. I see yourself as more connected, more a far better expert around tracking and all. So my thoughts was, what is it we are actually tracking with cookie, all those things? That's something which I needed to look. So I'll explore further in the discussion down the line. But for me, it's about uh, restrictions are continuously happening, browser based, or uh, there are rulings, there's GDPR, all those things. So there are restrictions around cookie, what it cannot do. It's all a mess. And particularly for global companies, it is very difficult to manage each and everything. For one company, we had close to 900 cookies we had to categorize. It was difficult, so we realized that it's okay to have cookies and do it the easy way, but there is effort required to maintain it, to be on the right side of to be compliant. So that's what it was. It was a bit challenging. So that's why I'm curious to learn more about cookieless tracking, some of the things which I've learned. When you do not do cookieless tracking, what impact does it do on your business?
I will admit right now, I think my only implementation I've ever done that is completely cookieless was the Skybox. So, Matt, I don't know if you've had any experience with truly cookieless implementation.
So I think it depends on what we mean by cookieless, because there's a few different ways of approaching it. And I know that this is one of the later questions, and we'll go into this in more detail. But a cookie essentially is its purpose is to persist data from one browser load until another, because the page DOM reloads every single time. Every time the browser reloads, and you lose all of your information. So if you want to be able to understand that one event or action related to the same user as the next event or action from page to page to page to page, you need something to persist. And that's kind of the point, because the something to persist is the key. It doesn't have to be a cookie. It could be local storage. It could be session storage. It could be, there's all kinds of different things. Fingerprinting, for example, it could be an authenticated user ID. There's all sorts of different levels of persistence that don't require a cookie. So there's truly cookieless tracking, which is, in the spirit of the legislation, you're collecting individual events and you're essentially counting those events, but you are not joining them together in any way, shape, or form. And then there is cookieless tracking that tries to create persistence via some other method. And there's, I can't remember the bloody name of it, but the Google flock of seagulls bird related API sandbox thing where you push data down into it and shared local storage and all the rest of it. But they're just as in breach of the legislation as a cookie would be, because the legislation states cookies or similar technologies. And then you have fingerprinting, which is again trying to achieve the same thing. So I think it depends what people mean by cookieless, and then that adds confusion. And then, of course, you just have tools that claim to be cookieless, but in fact aren't. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of marketing material around cookieless tracking, and there was one there was one tool that claimed to be cookieless tracking, and then I went on their own website, which is obviously using their tool, and lo and behold, it set cookies. And when we spoke to them about it, it says, "Oh, it can do cookieless tracking," in the same way that GA4 can do cookieless tracking. So I think it's a very, very confusing landscape when we're talking about cookieless tracking, and it really does depend exactly what it is we're talking about. Sorry if you're going to.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, this isn't school. You don't have to raise your hand at all. Just butt in.
Go straight and tell me to shut up.
It was something to say that, oh, I have a point. So
Yeah.
I think with cookieless, one thing is, so if you categorize cookies, essential, functional, analytics, and targeting, I understand that majority of the cookieless discussion is about third-party cookies, which are seen as bad actor cookies, which can be misused, right? So that's what it is. I think for users, I don't see a scenario where there's like absolutely zero cookies on any website. At least, I mean, and for that matter, it's mobile is there, which is like majority of the traffic happening on the internet these days. How many users actually switch off cookies going into the mobile settings as well? They're there. The web is the one platform where some of the product purchases, some of the e-commerce journeys, they happen mostly on desktop. So that's why I think the discussion is about which cookies are we talking about. I understand that this is only majorly, at least, about third-party cookies, ad platform cookies, which users say, okay, I don't want to be chased for an ad across the internet. First parties are like, you need them. So a lot of things can go under essential. You can't even actually
I don't know.
you can't actually do anything about it.
Yeah. So for me, when we're talking about cookieless tracking, I am talking about if it any cookies that is strictly designed just for your analytics. So not for your cookies that make the site run or to maintain that this person has logged in, because a site needs to keep that type of maintenance going.
Mm.
So I would be saying it would be anything that's strictly needed just for Google Analytics or strictly just for Adobe or any of these others.
Or
So
for testing or marketing purposes. I mean, Facebook and Google Ads, and DoubleClick, CM360, the rest of them, they all use first-party cookies, as well as third-party cookies. Sorry, carry on.
I was gonna say we can park the whole marketing and the personalization and A/B testing cookies. To make this simple, let's focus strictly on the analytics ones, the one that's for the actual tracking for analytical purposes.
Well, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily have to do that. I mean, look, my understanding of PECR is that it's, and again, this doesn't necessarily limit itself to cookies or similar technologies, but PECR, up until what we're going to talk about in a bit, it said that you can't read or write from the browser unless it falls into one of two exempt categories. And the one exempt category that we normally talk about from a digital perspective is something that is required, that is essential for the website to function, is essential for, actually, if you think about the wording, it is essential to deliver the service that the user has requested. So, for example, a language selection cookie is essential. A cookie that maintains your basket from one page to the next, don't lose your basket, is essential. Everything else isn't. And it talks about cookies and similar technologies, but it also talks about reading and writing from the browser. So something that doesn't set a cookie or use any kind of persistence, but reads or writes data from the browser, collects information, is also prohibited unless it's essential for delivering a service. So I guess there's 2 points in there, and I'm conflating multiple things. But I mean, there's cookieless tracking, or let's just say persistence-free tracking, which could apply to analytics, it could apply to A/B testing, it could apply to personalization, and it could apply to marketing. Because an example might be setting a first-party cookie and tying it to an authenticated user ID, like a hashed email address, and then pushing that up into Google Marketing Platform, and you're using a first-party cookie to achieve third-party tracking around the web by linking it to a user identifier. I mean, so it's a minefield. I've lost my own bloody place just talking, just finishing that sentence. It's but for me, what kind of cookieless tracking are we talking about here? Are we talking about persistence-free data collection?
Yes.
Analytics. Yes.
Just
Specifically analytics. Okay.
I had this question about data collection, and Andrew, this is definitely for you. So any analytics cookie which we have, we collect. Let's say it represents a data point. That data point has some business use down the line. It goes into reports. It does for analysis, statistics, whatever. So of that, there is some which I don't think they require cookies per se. For example, if you just want to collect interactions on a page, or how users are interacting with your site content, essentially, say in the terms of Sky, they're opening, closing, collapsing, expanding different modules on the page. So those are the things which I think do not require cookies per se. But say when you want to do the analysis of how users change their behaviors, there's a journey to purchase any product. So once they first come, they probably interact more with researchy kind of content. Say they'll go and then explore. There's a box, there's a TV, there's a sports, entertainment, all those things, and then they will decide, oh, I can't afford sports, I can't afford entertainment, but I want to watch movies. So then they'll go into different. So they'll probably start their journey next time next week, next day, they will come, they say, I've already made up my mind. I'm going to go directly onto the movies page. So they've done the research, they've looked at the offering, what any website is doing, and then they select. So as they move forward, that journey is important for everyone to understand where they can augment the journey, where they can support users with relevant content through that journey. Without cookies, that becomes difficult to do.
And I think that's where it will always get complicated when we're talking about persistence and capturing things that persist. Because once you talk about anything that is persistence, you have to create a cookie. You have to create a local source. You have to create something on that device that will maintain that information.
Exactly. Something that's stored on the device.
I think that's where we need to figure out what is it that you're moving to? Because to me, a cookieless tracking is essentially going back to the very early days of the internet, where you're no longer talking about conversion or anything like that. You're talking about hit tracking and those lovely hit counters that you saw on every website back in the day.
Yeah.
So yes, and I think it comes down to what are you trying to do? If all you want to know is how many people landed and how many people converted, then you can do that with event level tracking. If you want any kind of attribution in order to say how many people landed from a particular source, and then how many of those people, and it's those people that's the key, then went on to convert, you need some level of persistence, which you can't do through hit level tracking. I mean, there are interesting ways of working around it, and they skirt in a grey area. So I mean, you look at something like GA4's advanced consent mode, for example, which doesn't set a cookie but does collect data. So again, technically under PECR, you can't read from the browser or write to the browser without the user's prior consent. So that's already, to my mind, that's already in breach of PECR. Any kind of event level tracking, any kind of hit level tracking is in breach of PECR unless it's for an essential purpose, which it isn't. But you look at that, and then you can take that event level data, because the thing is not everybody is going to decline consent. So you have a pot of people that will have persistence, and they take certain behaviors, and then you have a pot of people that won't have persistence, and you'll just be collecting event level data. But the fun trick is you push both of those things up into the same system, and then you model the cookieless data using the cookie data, because you've got a training data set. And that's what Google are doing. They re-sessionize it. They turn it into users. They're inferred users. And then there's a whole question around, does that infringe on people's privacy? Because they're virtual users. So like, does it really matter if it's virtual users? I mean, I think it does, but you can do that, and you don't have to do it through Google. You could start collecting event level data into your own, cloud environment, and so long as you had a cookie level pot of data to train the event level data on, you could start to re-sessionize it. And I'm losing myself again, but
But
go ahead.
Even though that training data needs to be privacy compliant for it to be trained.
But that's the thing, is the training data would be privacy compliant. So let's say you've got a 70% opt-in rate. So 30% of your users are being tracked via advanced consent mode without cookies, and you're just getting hit level data in. But you've got a 70% pot of data that is perfectly privacy compliant because you've asked for consent, and then you retrain. So you train the models to basically re-sessionize the event level data and turn it back into sessions. That's exactly what GA4 does. The issue is going to be, as more and more of that data, when your consent rate drops to, like, what's the threshold? If your consent rate drops to 10% rather than 70%, is the remodeling even remotely valid anymore? Does that even work?
I think for the purpose of reporting, that there could be a threshold, like 60-70% consent level is needed or whatever. But say for the purpose of insights or key business decisions, if it comes down to say people are only 10%, 20% users are only giving consent, it would still be a very rich set of data. If you compare it with say other sources in the business with say surveys or any other way,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it would still be better, far better than its actual interaction data. So it would still be better, even though it's 20% consent. But maybe not for reporting to say, oh, our website did 100
So-
million traffic. Probably not. That may not be possible, but
But
learning could be possible.
reporting to one side though, and this is why I didn't want to limit it to analytics cookies. Reporting to one side. What about for the purposes of A/B testing and maintaining people within a particular test group? What about for the purposes of marketing and using it to exclude existing customers and using that 10% for lookalike modeling? Like, how effective is that going to be? And I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but
So
that's the worry.
I think in A/B tests, I've done few. So from my understanding, there are tests which are run, which you would do for some content on a single page, right? And you would understand the behavior, how it is being interacted. But then there are tests which are tests for the journey itself. You have the content and its impact is seen and it's expected to be seen down the funnel. Those kind of tests where you show content and you expect users to come back again and again for a high ticket item purchase, maybe a broadband connection, for example, right? You spend a week at least, or maybe 15 days to decide. So you'll come back again and again. So if you have an experience on day one, bucket them into that experience through A/B test. You would want you want that consistency to be there. Otherwise, users will be thrown off to say, okay, I saw that yesterday, it's not there. So for those kind of tests, it is a challenge.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because you start to touch on things like Safari ITP, and sorry, and I apologize for jumping in, but the reason I mention that is because you made a really good point, which is when it's a multi-touch journey, something where someone might come back after 15 days. If they're on Safari, the cookie's gone. The cookie that was maintaining them in the control or the test group is gone. It's probably gone after 24 hours because the chances are the user landed on the site via some sort of marketing campaign, and if the cookie is set in the context of any kind of Safari WebKit kind of understood marketing tracking, then the cookies are restricted to 24 hours, but it's definitely gone after a week. And so if you're talking about an A/B test that's a multi-touch journey with anything more than 7 days, 7 days and 1 minute, cookies gone. You almost want to exclude all Safari users from your A/B test, apart from the fact that it's about 50% of the traffic.
Well, that's where I'm always wondering. So you have IP address, even if you obfuscate it, what useful would it not be useful for Safari? You say, look, let's not use cookies, but let's base it off of browser and IP address. And if you're within this range, you get the control. If you're in this range, you get the new version. So that way you're always guaranteed to keep them in that one pot.
Yeah, you could do. And I think that that's obfuscated enough to be not considered as fingerprinting as well, because it's just, it's just
IP. I had this thing. We did some work for a fintech client on IP address, and at that time, and every organization's privacy policy is different. At that time, in that instance, IP address was considered as a PII data point. So anything to so much so as touches would need to be approved through and through, right down to the end of it, to say that what is the purpose, what would happen after you would have done that test, what would happen to the data, how long it's going to be stored, all those questions.
Wouldn't that be for the full IP address with his obfuscated IP address?
Yeah, we changed the last octet.
We can. We had we were lucky enough to have the proper one. So I mean, it's one thing that do you want to go through that exercise? And at the time, the decision was, I thought, okay, we are doing everything in the interest of customers to provide them a better solution, better experience. So we went through that journey of getting it whitelisted, that particular project whitelisted, uh, with our legal team to say, okay, this is what we want to do. It took like 3-4 months, I guess, back and forth discussions, etc. But it eventually went through, and it was one of the most successful ones. I think it's still in the use. So it's it's that. So I'd say the other thing about cookie-less tracking is why we should not even have this discussion if we say we are ready to work with privacy and get all our activities uh, whitelisted to say we want to do this. Privacy team, could you help us? How could we do that? But that's not going to happen. Not every cookie could be justified, because yes, there could be 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe a dozen reasons for that cookie to exist, good reasons, but there could be risks associated with that as well, which when you weigh, the risk would be a lot more. That's where the sensitivity has come in many businesses, where even to drop one extra cookie, you have a process to go through.
Yeah. And I do think we need to move on, because I realize we've been on this discussion what is cookieless tracking, and I think we're all giving up really good points on what it could be. But as you can see, for everyone it is slightly different. But I had one question, and I don't want to name any tool names, but it's a tool that I got introduced to quite recently. And to avoid being the third party Armageddon of cookies, where it's no longer going to be possible because Google Chrome is getting rid of it, they decided that in their script that they were going to drop a CSS file. And in that CSS file, it contains the unique cookie value that they want this person to have.
And then it would get cached, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is, would you consider that cookieless tracking?
No. It's
Yeah,
a persistent identifier. In the spirit of the legislation, that is a workaround. That's just trying to find new and that's just a game of whack-a-mole. That's just trying to find new and innovative ways of getting around the legislation, which will eventually be picked off.
Yeah. I mean, I had to give them props because I've never seen anyone drop a CSS that only contains that.
Then what's wrong with dropping a 1 by 1 size pixel blank image and name it something?
Well,
yeah.
Let's just say that there were more than one way that this tool was using to try to get this information. They were covering every base possible. So
Yeah.
I gave them a lot of props for creativity, but it did feel overbearing at the same time.
Well, okay, so it's, but that's a grey area, because is that trying to get around ITP, which some may consider to be an overstep of the bounds by a particular browser, or is it trying to get around GDPR or privacy? Because so long as you only set that CSS selector and the pixel and all the other fingerprinting stuff you do with the consent of the user, so it's the relationship between you as a business and the consent that the user has given you, so long as it's with the consent of the user, then I don't have a problem with it. Because ITP, but my frustration with ITP is, well, hang on a minute, I've done everything that the EU and has asked me to do. I've served a banner. I'm telling people about their cookie choices. I'm allowing them to switch them off. They're turned off by default only when they click accept. Am I setting anything? And then you're capping it to 24 hours. You're not the arbiter. You're not the legal guardian of privacy. So I think it depends. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it so long as it is done in a compliant way.
I agree with on the compliance way. And this one was nothing to do with ITP. It was strictly the belief that Google Chrome was going to be stopping all third-party cookies.
But that's an ITP thing. It's not ITP because ITP is WebKit and Safari, but it's the same thing. It's that a browser is going to stop doing a thing. It's not to do with trying to get around the legislation. It could be used in that way, but that's not necessarily what it is. What it is these browsers are locking down on these technologies, so we will find different technologies.
I take it that there could be more ways to do a certain type of tracking. And I believe creativity in this particular topic is dangerous.
I think eventually you need to stick to it. So long as you're compliant with what your users have told you that you are allowed to do, then you're good.
Yeah.
Do that.
Particularly in EU, like you tread one step at a time, and you just cannot run with these things in EU. It's a minefield.
And I think I'm gonna run over here, but I'll still be around.
No problem. So, what are the benefits of cookieless tracking? Well, one of the huge benefits, you really don't need to ask for consent on can you drop cookies, because there is no cookies. There's no local storage. You're literally just sending event level information.
Yeah.
Still need to consent.
You need consent to send it, yes. But there is no cookies.
This is an interesting one. I think because you're talking about different cookie categorizations. There does seem to be a kind of unhealthy obsession with cookies rather than looking at the other technologies. And I come across something quite interesting recently, which is there is any number of consent platforms. So we do a lot of work with ObservePoint, and we import consent standards from websites into ObservePoint. And a lot of the consent platforms, they only look at cookies. They don't look at network requests, data being sent and received, and so on. And the thing I realized the other day is that if a consent platform, let's say you're in a business, and we've got a client that's exactly like this, where they have not approved the use of Google Advanced Consent Mode. They want to remain in basic consent mode. How would a consent management platform that only looks at cookies control a cookieless tool? And how would you ever know if somebody implemented Google in GA4 in advanced consent mode? That consent management platform, no matter how many times it scans, because it's only looking for cookies, it's not looking at network requests, would never know that anyone had done that. The whole business could be going on Google Advanced Consent Mode. The legal team could not have signed it off, and no one would have any idea that was happening.
I've worked with a couple of platforms. So in both of them, so there's no scenario with zero cookies anyway. So in both those platforms, you would go and say, these are my whitelisted cookies, essential. And it would scan, and as long as those cookies are there, it's still okay. It would only ask for consent for cookies which in that particular country are consent is required. So there's another thing. In EU, before dropping a cookie, you need to have the consent. And maybe my understanding may be stale, but correct me if there's any new update to it. But that's what I understand. Before dropping a cookie, you need a consent. Whereas in US, I guess, you can drop the cookie and then ask consent. If there's no consent, then the consent is implicit in US.
Well, when it comes to consent in the US, that's a state-by-state basis. There are some states that you don't even have to ask.
Yeah, you don't have to ask.
Yeah. But I believe you're right that, like, Ikshit, I think under CCPA, so Europe is opt-in. You have to block everything until the user opt-in. CCPA, I believe, is opt-out. So you can say in advance, and then the user has the option to opt out. But I think what I was driving at, and it's relevant to cookieless platforms, is what about platforms and it isn't necessarily illegal, it's a gray area or whatever, but what about businesses that haven't approved the use of a cookieless platform like GA and advanced consent mode? So the legal team haven't approved the use of that, and we've got a client that this is exactly the case with. They haven't approved the use of advanced consent mode because PECR says that you can't write and read information off a browser. So they said, no, advanced consent mode, we don't want it. They have a consent management platform that only focuses on cookies. That's all it stands for. That's all it checks for. Advanced consent mode doesn't set cookies. How would they, without external validation and scanning, and they've got hundreds of websites, how would they know that some of those websites have deployed advanced consent mode using their consent management platform?
They never will.
They never will. And this is the thing, it's the obsession with cookies. But that's the thing, is it's cookieless tracking is still tracking. And your legal team might very well, because we're talking about the benefits of cookieless tracking, and one of the benefits, I would argue, is that you can start to collect 100% of data again. It won't be connected data. You won't be able to join it from one session to another, unless you've got a single page app and you set a page level identifier, but it's a single page app, so the page level identifier never gets refreshed, and then it's just doing the same job as a cookie. Or unless you've got approval to collect hashed user identifiers and you just happen to forget to switch that off for people who are in a non-consented state, and suddenly you can join that whole session together, and so on and so forth. But the benefit of cookieless tracking is you get 100% visibility. But how do you have visibility of whether people are using cookieless tracking if all that everyone bloody talks about is cookies? So it becomes the Wild West again. It becomes that whole situation that we used to have before GDPR.
Benefits, yes, we don't have the banner and etc. I think the more important question is, what do we lose if we don't have? From my experience, I think not much. We could we could be as better as when we use cookies. So that's coming from, say, from the earlier point. Every cookie is collecting a data point, and that data point has a usage in the business. If you start to categorize, why do we need to connect journey? That journey connection, that session connection after next day, next week, is the only one missing piece, which is the big piece. You can say that's one thing which you would miss. Other than that, user language selections, cart, if you configure a broadband, etc., those are allowed. So that's not even a problem. It's just a journey connection for the purpose of marketing and analysis is something which goes away. And then there are other ways to still do it. You use the same data, you understand user interaction behavior, you build a machine learning model. I think we built at Sky as well, which was smart enough to identify within 2 to 3 clicks what the user is wanting to do on the page. Because when users are landing onto the page, we already know awful lot about them. They're coming from Google, or they're coming from Facebook, or they're coming from TikTok, or wherever they're coming in. Which ad campaign they're coming from, or have they searched or just typed in. There's a lot of information which is already there on the first hit anyway. 2, 3 more hits, and any good machine learning model will pick up that what this user is trying to do.
So from a personalization point of view, because I think that's a really, really interesting thing that you've raised, because I was ready to disagree with you, and then I thought, no, I'll shut up and I'll listen. What I found really interesting is what you're saying is that actually you can still infer intent, and you can still personalize to the user based off information that is available within that snapshot of the first page load. I'd like a bit more information on that. I love that.
I have a slide I'll send you. I don't have it up right now, but it just says once you build a machine learning model for personalization based on interactions, it becomes smart enough over a period of time. And for big companies, there's no dearth of data. So even the first instance of the model is good enough. When users land on a page, say home page, and then they go to a broadband page, it would start understanding what this user is wanting to do.
So
you connect that with if the user is coming from your search campaign category or social campaign category or your email you have sent out. If it's email, it's very easy anyway. But suppose they search, there are different kinds of search. So suppose the search group is for movies or the search group is for sports, right?
So,
search campaign. So those things would carry a lot of information anyway at the first hit.
okay, so I've got a question on that. So that is in the moment when the user hits the site, but obviously you've got to have a huge amount of previous information to build the model in the first place. So you don't necessarily need persistence once the user hits, but how much persistence and data connectivity did you need to build the model in the first place? Because surely it's trained on the ability to attribute the sale to that. You've got the initial hit level information. So if it was truly cookieless, would you have been able to build the model in the first place?
So if you don't do cookies, you still get the session level data, right? A user within a session.
Well, no, because how do you persist from one page view to the next? The cookie, without any kind of page level, without any kind of browser level persistence, it would be a completely new user every time the browser reloads. So unless it's like a single page app or something like that, you wouldn't have connectivity within the session.
It could be single page, but as I said, there is no scenario with zero cookies. So some of the cookies are essential. So for the session, for the purpose of the session is considered to be a user's moment with a sort of response. So if you go to it's saying if you go to the store, you ask the front desk, I want to buy the broadband, and they tell you. They send you to the another desk, and then you again have to explain, I want to buy the broadband. It's not, so it's in digital, so 30 minutes or whatever the cookie duration is. It is a session which is allowed.
Well, it's not though, because by using that cookie for the purposes of analysis, you've changed the purpose of the cookie. So if you have a cookie that is used to maintain a session, but you change the use of that cookie and you start to use it to analyze behavior, then it's now an analytics cookie and should be blocked.
Yep.
So
if you do not have that cookie, how could an e-commerce site work?
They could have that cookie because they need it for e-commerce. But the moment that they are capturing that into Adobe Analytics or any other analytical tool, it is now classified as an analytics one. So then they would have to ask for permission. Can we use this cookie for the analytics?
So a really good example, like just taking it and abstracting it away, is Adobe. And I won't use the Web SDK. I'll just use the old JavaScript libraries. Adobe has the ECID, the MC Viz ID cookie. That cookie feeds Adobe Target, Audience Manager, and Analytics. So dependent on the context of use, that cookie has three separate purposes.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you can, and this is why the obsession with cookies is frustrating, because actually it's the downstream usage. You can have the same cookie, but if the user doesn't consent to analytics, you can't send that cookie to analytics. You have to switch that off. So to your point around the session, the end-to-end session, and still being able to use that to sort of track the user from the start of the session to the end, you're not allowed to do that, because you've told the user that the cookie is essential and that it's used to maintain their language preferences. If you use that identifier to not maintain their language preferences, but in fact to analyze their usage of the site, then that's illegal, because you're not adhering to the use that you told them when they signed your cookie policy, and you recorded that they had signed it, and you kept that record in a content management platform. They agreed to language preferences. They didn't agree to be tracked. And so you use it to track it, you're not allowed to do that. So cookieless tracking, if we're talking about truly cookieless tracking, you can't track from the start of the session to the end of the session.
So I think the only way that you could do that is through fingerprint. And the only way to do that in a compliant way is if you have the IP address obfuscated, and then you have the user agent to say this is the browser it was, and then you have a lookalike model going along those paths.
Compliant with what? Not PCR. Because PECR you can't read from or write to the browser. Irrespective of whether it's a personal identifier or not, you cannot read from or write to the browser without consent for the purposes of analysis.
But the fact is that you could have this data going into your server because you need to keep maintain that this browser was on this page at this time. So that's going back to the server logs.
True, but as soon as you use those server logs for the purposes of analysis, you see what I'm saying? It's you can do it, and everybody does. But I mean, I'm being a dick. But it's to the letter of the law. You can't do it. Can't do it. As soon as you start using that data for something that you didn't tell the user you were going to use it for, and you start using it for the purposes of analysis, which are not covered under the essential category, technically.
Purpose is the word which is always underlined.
Downstream use. Purpose. What are you using it for? 100%.
Yep. And I think ultimately we could go to point 4. And what are the negative points of cookieless tracking? Bottom line is, it is physically not possible.
Well, look, you can do it, and everybody does. Like how many companies do we know that are using Google Advanced Consent Mode? And everybody says it's a grey area. It's not a grey area. To my mind, it's not a grey area. It's in breach of PECR. But is anybody actually going to? Because that's the other thing. Is like, what's the risk? And it's always a risk reward thing. So what do I get from this? Millions and millions and millions of pounds. Brilliant. What's the risk that I'm actually going to get hit with a fine or any reputational damage? At this stage, they've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but if we go back to the fact that if you want to go with the letter of the law, OneTrust is not asking you, do you consent to have analytic cookies or analytical things being written into your browser? It's, do you consent to be tracked? So if we take it from that point of view, the fact that you are tracking them, there is no gray area on that. It doesn't matter that it's being
yes or
a virtual user.
100%, 100%, and that's why we need. But I think we need better mechanisms of gathering consent and better incentives to get users to give consent, rather than just trying to obfuscate our way around it by saying, "Oh, well, we're not setting cookies." I mean, the thing is, like, and I keep coming back to Google Advanced Consent Mode. It sets a page level identifier. It sets a unique identifier. It's just a variable that gets wiped when the page loads. But the number of websites that are on React or or whatever that are single page apps that preload all the content, basically you could have a checkout journey that is a single page application from start to finish, and you could track the entire checkout journey and assign it to the same user without any machine learning whatsoever, because the page level identifier never gets removed.
And this is something which I actually would love a in-depth conversation on. And it goes back to Safari ITP. The only way that they are able to wipe after 7 browser days is that they are tracking you. Isn't that kind of against the legislation? Because where did I sign up for consent for them to do that?
So you're saying that for those 7 days you were being tracked.
It's not even 7 days. It's 7 browser days. That's where it gets fun, because it's based off of each days I opened it up.
Exactly.
That could have happened in 7 days. It could have happened over 1 month.
But I think there must be, um, I mean, I think at this point we must be lacking some of the legal experts in this discussion. They can say, "Oh, don't be harsh on yourself. You're allowed to do that."
Yeah, and that's the
Not
thing.
ones I know.
And every company will have a different viewpoint on these things.
Yeah.
What we're saying is, let's get rid of that part. Let's go to what is the letter of the law and what its intent was. They keep talking about is cookies, but it's not about cookies. Cookies really means nothing on its own. It's around the tracking and what you can do with it.
Mm.
It's downstream use. It's what you use in the
Yeah.
data for. And actually,
Yeah.
I've been a bit harsh on my my legal colleagues that I've got. I think actually probably the biggest piece of advice I would give anyone trying to navigate this minefield is to form a very close relationship with your legal and compliance team and help them do their job, make their lives easy, and then they will reciprocate. It's it's a huge benefit treating them as colleagues and people that you
Yeah.
work you're going on this journey with rather
Yeah.
than adversaries.
Yeah, I cannot agree more on that. At Sky, I had a biweekly call with our compliance manager. At Investec, I had a biweekly call with the compliance one. And ultimately, they tell me thank you because they know that they can leave the digital analytics loan and that I will come to them and ask for permission on these things. So that way, as they put it to me, it's one less fire that they have to ever worry about.
And Andrew, of the clients we work with now, I've certainly seen that they feel it's a refreshing attitude and not one that they've necessarily come across before. That we integrate with them and we talk to them and we try to make this easy. We say, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is exactly how we're trying to do it. This is what the law says. This is what we want to do. And like that is something that I think it's been treated as an adversarial relationship, and it really shouldn't be, because it's very clear what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and it's just a risk appetite.
Yeah. It goes to a book that I've been telling you so much about, Matt. It was the Turn the Ship Around. And it's not so much that you're trying to step on their toes. You're literally trying to be a captain like them and saying, I want to do this. Here's why I want to do this. Here is the risk and the negative side behind it.
Is the benefit.
Now, give me approval. You have all the information.
Yeah, or not, as the case may
Well,
be.
yeah.
And I won't
Give me a
hold
decision.
I won't hold it against you if you tell me I'm not allowed to do it. You know.
Exactly.
So
I think
when in doubt, it's always good to check, especially in this matter.
Yeah,
because we all do a lot of things which are, quick campaign tracking, quick thing this, quick thing that. Assumption is the enemy in this particular topic.
100%.
To assume anything, to say, okay, it's okay or not okay. And it is different for different organizations. So it's still, again, if you assume something or probably you learn something with client A, may not be relevant for client B at all.
Yes.
I mean, you can put it across, but they will have a totally different take on it.
Yeah, totally. And I think clients operating in different geographic areas, that's been a really big eye opener for me, where there's almost a completely different attitude, and also just different legislation, and operating in those in those markets has just been very interesting.
I think the next point we've pretty much already covered. Why and when do we need cookie for data collection? It's if you want to know what someone's doing beyond just that one page. So, and that's why I think, based off of all the conversation we're having, while it is physically possible to have a cookieless implementation, there is really no benefit behind it because you still have to have that consent. So even if there is no cookie banner, all you're saying is you're not giving them an option to say, give you consent for analytics.
Yeah.
All right.
So that comes to the new one. Yeah. Consent for analytics, number 6.
Yep. So does the
I thought
DUAA Act of 2025 make this a moot point?
I thought it was good, and I was happy that everyone in the UK would, most of the e-commerce brands I know of, they would see a surge in their traffic because it's not required anymore. But then Andrew messaged me on WhatsApp, it's not the case.
Not 100%. So let's just take a step back for a second. So ultimately, this was a new legislation that finally got its royal assent. So King Charles went ahead and knighted it and said, "Hey, you're in law now." And it's something that they have been talking about for a very long time. It's been debated and it's been sitting in the House of Lords for over a year now. And Matt and I, we actually had a conversation about this while it was in the House of Lords. And there have been things that have changed. So when you go through and you start reading what are the updates, it literally states that you no longer need consent for statistical purposes or personalization purposes on the website. But when you get down to the final point, it does say as long as you have their consent. So the
Oh.
way that I am interpreting this
Mm.
is you could actually start the tracking, you could start the personalization, but you still have to give them the easy way of saying, actually, I don't want you to do it. So it's if you think of GDPR, it's you're not allowed to track until you get a confirmed yes. It's you're allowed to track until you get confirmed no now based off of this.
Yeah, it's CCPA. So we're working with a client in the US, and it's exactly that. It's you and you look in the consent management platform. It's extremely obvious. Opt-in is Europe. Everything is switched off by default until you agree. And exactly as you said earlier, Ikshit, in fact, I'm just repeating something that you called out. US is opt out, so you are opted in until you decide to opt out. That's all it is. So I think it means you can get that. The thing is that first page view, that landing page view, dropping the cookie, that's really valuable from a tracking point of view. Just because, like you mentioned, Ikshit, like a lot of the most valuable information that you're ever going to get about that user comes on the landing page. So just switching you from an opt-in state to an opt-out state is hugely valuable. Marketing and understanding how many people have landed on the site and so on.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm going to probably bore people for a moment because I actually did print up where the changes are, and I just want to read it what it actually says just for the analytical point because it's similar. I'm just having fun watching Matt.
I was trying to duck out of the screen while you were talking about like reading out, but the bloody fisheye camera just followed me back. I was going to like do like a visual joke where I sank below the surface, but actually it's just it can still see me.
Yep. So, but the question is, Matt, did you consent to allow it to track you?
Yes. Why not?
Exactly. So, the person provides an information society service. The sole purpose of the storage or access is to enable the person to collect information for statistical purposes about how the service is used with the service, and to collect information for statistical purposes about how a website by means of making improvements to the website. Any information that the storage or access enables the person to collect is not shared with anyone else. The subscriber or user is provided with clear and comprehensive information about the purpose. And the last one, the subscriber or user is given a simple means of objecting free of charge to the storage or access. So it's the simple fact that the very last line, which wasn't there originally, was that they have the ability to reject it. So the question is, what does that actually mean?
Well, actually, can I just take you back one thing?
Yeah.
That it's not shared with anyone else.
Yeah, so essentially you're not sharing it with a third party.
So that's that's your Google Signals GA4 GMP integration out of the window.
Yep.
I mean,
And
yeah.
when do they give that consent? In which part of the journey? Towards the end?
So that's where I think it's fun. So if you are saying there's an automatic opt-in, do you have to even give them a way to opt out in the cookie banner? Or
Yes.
do you say that it's essential, but you have the ability to go here to actually opt yourself out?
No, you give it them in the cookie banner.
Mhm.
That would be my take. The way I've seen this done in the US is that it's an identical banner. You have the option to open the cookie preference center. Basically, everything is switched on by default, and you have the capacity to switch it off, and then click to save my preferences. Or you have the option, and to be honest, this for the UK, I expect you will still need to provide a reject all option with equal prominence to accept. So actually, you'll just be able to hit reject all, and it'll remove everything. I think that to me feels like the obvious thing that's going to happen is tracking will be on by default, and you'll have accept all or reject all, and you hit reject all, and it's switched off thereafter. That would seem to be obvious.
Yep.
I think HMRC website does this job in a different way. The big banner comes up top of the page, says accept analytics cookies. Right then. And it's so big that you can't ignore it. It's there. It takes about 20-25% of the page height, and it says accept analytics cookies, and it's a green button, like
Yeah.
It's not a threatening orange or red button. It's green button. So users like, oh, it's green. It's click on it. I generally, HMRC is a credible site, so you can definitely say yes, accept analytical cookies, no problem. But it's there. It's there to ask you. Like you just can't ignore it throughout the session. It will just keep at it.
Yeah, but it's also probably a website that any of us probably only goes to once a year.
But also that example, I imagine that they're in an opt-in state, so I imagine everything's switched off by default, and then you can accept or reject, but it won't track you. The way I would expect this to manifest in the UK, and the thing is, it makes things bloody complicated because if you're a company that potentially serves the European market at the same time, you'll have to have like IP recognition to serve a banner that's opt out for UK customers and a banner that's opt in for all of your European customers, and then a banner that's opt out for your US customers that that are under CCPA, and then just track everybody, do what the fuck you like for the rest of the US, and then don't show any banner at all for the rest of the world apart from Australia, Japan, Brazil, Mexico.
We should invest in consent management platforms.
It's only going to get bigger.
They will be in demand with all these complications across. Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean, I see it being that you'll get a banner. Within the UK at least, you will still need to give the equal prominence to reject, because the ICO has been very clear on that. You've got accept and reject, and basically tracking is on by default when you land, but if you hit reject, then it's switched off after that. That would be the way I would see that turning out.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way we're going to find out for sure is if this guy has changed anything to deal with that is by reading every last portion of the update, which I don't know about you. That's just not enough of a light reading I'm ready to do right now.
I mean, from what you said though, it's you can kind of see that that's where it's going. It's basically it's following a kind of CCPA kind of model.
Yep. With one more benefit, it does define that a website is anything that serves. So that means a mobile app, mobile website, the terminal at the airport.
Yeah. You have to have a cookie banner.
Yep.
And your set-top box, going back to Sky. you'd have to have your cookie banner on the set-top box.
Yep. Which, I mean, I could just imagine it now. You just plugged in your Skybox, because up on TV. Can we track you? I just want to bloody watch my show.
I think the thing that I find fun with that is, can we track you? Yes. Okay, it's only going to last for the next 365 days, and then we'll ask you again. But you want to get on, and watch the game, and your favorite team's playing, and then you've got to dismiss this cookie banner with a remote.
Yeah, heaven forbids. Let's hope that doesn't actually interfere whenever you try to do the record. Can you imagine if it was 365 and the record came up and you don't get to see the game? You just had that window over it. Nah. I'm sure that there is something smarter behind it where that pop-up only will come up when you're actively using it. All right. Well, I'm done looking at King Charles for a second, so we should move on to let's wrapping things up. So, ultimately, what are your final thoughts? Is cookieless tracking, while it's physically possible, is it actually really possible?
There are always cookies. I mean, it's the e-commerce platforms, right? Or how the whole show runs. So I don't think, I mean, in today's world, everything is possible. So, but I don't see, I do not know anything which is coming up in the near future, which is say, okay, can have 0 cookies at all.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to have IP address, then you can't really do it that way. The only way I can see this being beneficial is if you're literally just going back to the good old days of hit tracking. How many hits did this article get? How many hits did this page get? How many hits on this particular button?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as far as business insights go, majority of those are possible, even without the cookies. Some are not, but there's still quite a lot of uh, analytics work which can still continue without requiring cookies or connected sessions across. I heard there was a platform called Drawbridge, which could connect your journeys across devices. We shouldn't name the platforms, but it was. I didn't use it, but it was, so it could connect your journeys from your mobile, from your TV, from your laptop. It was at that time. Those things are those kind of platforms are really valuable. But for me, wrap up is after this discussion, I'm left wanting more. So I'm sort of not able to conclude that this discussion has reached an end. I think we may need somebody from expert in privacy law or someone who can join this discussion next time to answer some of our questions. And I know maybe they'll say it depends few many times, but still there are some very basic questions which I would still want to kind of, as I said, there's no scope for assuming anything. So yeah, some sort of even the way you interpreted the new new law DUA, it's our interpretation. But if the legal team doesn't see it that way, our interpretation doesn't hold any value. You see? So because they're the ones who own that thing, like, okay, this is the law, we are interpreting it with the privacy policy we have for this particular client. There's so many things which are still around with this. So yeah, that's why I think more discussions could be had on this topic.
Yeah.
Yep.
For me, my conclusion, I mean, bringing things back to cookieless tracking, And to your point, Ikshit, I think that companies need to be more careful about what they want data to do and what they want to use it for. You can achieve the basic levels of reporting using cookieless tracking because you can just do numbers like number of people who landed on a site, number of people who converted data. You've got a conversion rate. You don't need a cookie to do that. You can do that using internal systems. Where I think cookieless tracking is going to fall down is where you need connectivity between data sets. And to be honest, most of the revenue generation for businesses comes from connectivity. So where you want to be able to generate an audience and then upload that audience into DSPs and activate against that audience, you need to be able to connect the data that you've generated to the DSP. Can't do that without some sort of connection. Now, so for me, I feel like if you are going to go down more of a cookieless tracking route, then you need to lean more into first-party data, collecting hashed user identifiers, bringing those into your systems again, or all consented. And then if you're going to upload your data into your DSP, you can use hashed telephone, hashed email address, and so on, and activate your data that way. So I think it requires. For me, it requires a lot more understanding about like what is a cookie, and when we talk about cookies, we're talking about any kind of browser level persistence. It's just a shorthand. A cookie is a shorthand for browser persistence, and then define what you can achieve without it. Exactly as you say, what level of reporting, what level of business understanding can I achieve without any kind of persistence whatsoever from purely event level data. And then for the stuff that does require persistence of some kind, given that cookies are kind of we'll always need cookies of some sort, but cookies for the purposes of tracking and analysis are always going to require consent. That's never going to change, and there's no there's no working around that. And any kind of similar technology like fingerprinting or IP address or anything like that is always going to require consent.
I think
Understanding. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so you're right that way, but I also think that if you look at how users are engaging with the internet, they're spending more and more time on platforms per se, Facebook platform, or Facebook app, or Instagram app, right? And Facebook is like, when you sign up, they say we are going to do all this thing. If you don't want, please don't sign up. Simple as that. Their thing is their sign up form is that clear. We will do it. If you want, if you're happy, then sign up. Otherwise, don't sign up. So uh, it's it's like they're saying all the things upfront at the time of sign up. So there's no fuss, there's no much. Simple. We will do this. We are an app platform. We will serve you ads. That's what we are for, right? So in their sign up, they're very clear. And users are, if you say, look at it from this point of view, of all the interaction events, trillions of events happening, cookies are, what is the share of events cookies are enabling? That share is reducing because those events are more and more happening in apps, in other platforms here and there. So not necessarily, if you lose cookies altogether, I don't think the world's going to end. It will still be, the insights will be there. The businesses will keep doing the things. Facebook would still be serving the ads as it is now.
So question, because that raises a really, really interesting point. Facebook and Google can do that because they make you log in. So Facebook, you have to be logged in. No cookies required. You're signed in. In order to maintain your session, you have to be logged in. Google, they keep pushing. Every time your Chrome instance gets signed out, they want to push you to sign into Chrome. You're on an Android phone, which is the vast majority of mobile phone operating systems across the world. You're logged in. They know who you are. how do other businesses, though, without cookies, without some sort of browser level persistence, because that's a monopoly, like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, that's a monopoly. Google, Chrome, Android, that's a monopoly. It's a monopoly on data. It's a monopoly on identification. It's a monopoly
It's a win.
on
These are
IDs.
window to the internet. So there's no other window.
Yeah. So how does anybody this is why I sort of did that weird little thing because the conversation then becomes one around the future of the internet. And actually, suddenly we've gone from cookieless tracking to the future of the internet. But if I want to be able to understand what's happening, like cookies go away in the future, and all we've got is cookieless tracking, and we're not allowed, we legislated out of existence and so on. Does it even make sense to have a website anymore, or should I just have a Facebook page? Because at least with the Facebook page, I can understand what the hell's going on.
So one thing, have you heard about DuckDuckGo?
Yeah.
So yeah, one of my ex-colleagues is there, and I started using it. It was quite good. There was no complaints, but just because one is used to, then I realized that there is a need for me to be shown personalized ads. So it's not there. It has become actually a need as a customer who wants to find products. Personalized ads are actually the need. I don't want to do, research. I want those platforms to show me the products which I may need. Some customers will say, okay, no, I don't want it, but I felt that there is a need for me. I need personalized. I can't be seeing ads for items which I don't. For a lipstick, for example, I don't want to see the ad for it.
But how much is Google and Facebook and then OpenAI and ChatGPT, where all of the content is presented to the user before they actually have to go on your website in any meaningful way? To what extent are we getting closer? And this is now a sort of philosophical question around the future of the web. But
It's changing though. Yeah.
you might never need to go on the actual individual brand's website because all of the information around that website has been scraped and pulled and presented to you whilst you're still on Facebook or Google or ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then you have the option to shop through those platforms, or Amazon for that matter. I think it's an interesting thing because the more you move away from anonymous identifiers like cookies, because they are anonymous, they're personal information, but they're not PII. PII is a CCPA definition. It's things like email address, first name, last name, postcode. Personal information is something that can be used to identify a user, but it's obfuscated. So cookies are personal information. They track you, but they are anonymized. The more that we attack anonymized identifiers, the more that the freedom of, and it's a controversial opinion, but the more that the freedom of the internet is kind of compromised because you're pushed towards genuine logged in first party identifiers like email address, phone number. And who has got the biggest logged in user base on the planet? Facebook, Google, TikTok. And so it's a monopoly of the internet. So actually, maybe cookieless tracking is a moot point because individual brand websites will cease to exist and everything will just be done through AI and Google and Facebook eventually. The internet will be owned and you'll have to sign into a platform before you can even access it.
Yeah. I think that would be perfect for episode 11. I think it's probably a good point to just wrap up and tie off with a bow for now. And we'll call it Discussion of Cookieless Implementation Part 1. Who knows? Down the line, we may decide, let's talk about it again when newer technologies come out and a better understanding of what some of the new legislations are.
Yeah, we focus this discussion on analytics cookies, and then we can spend another 2 hours on targeted cookies. and another 2 hours on functional cookies. And so
Another 2 hours on the future of the web.
yeah.
Yep.
So, but yeah, let's have more discussions. There are more things, Andrew, I want to discuss. So we will definitely catch up more further. Okay.
Perfect. And as we're wrapping up, I've almost forgot one very important question, and that's to you, Matt.
Mm.
Who are we being sponsored by today?
Oh well, now you may well ask. So we started out being sponsored by Blanche Brussels, a heady little number and quite fruity, and then we moved on to being sponsored by Heineken. You know, the classics. Then we had a small sponsorship from Cronenberg. And finally, and I'm still in the middle of this one. We have a sponsorship from Le Chouf, the gnome. Is sort of Belgian ale kind of deal.
We talked about Sky quite a lot. We should get some sponsorship from them.
Yeah. Start getting some t-shirts or something.
Well,
Yeah.
as long as we keep believing in better, we can.
That's true.
Great. Lovely talking to you guys.
Well, Ikshit, Matt, thank you so much. So where are our podcasts? We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. I'm trying to move out to other places. There is a website coming down the line, so there will be a place where all the transcripts are going to be. You'll find out exactly who are all our guests, which episodes they're on, and just have easy way of connecting things. As long as I have their consent of putting up a page for them.
Yeah.
So a lot of things are coming. It's just going to take some time to actually make it all happen. And for that one person who did remain all the way to the end, a special thank you just to you. Ikshit, Matt, thank you so much for another Digital After Dark.
Great.
Have a good one,
Good
everyone.
night.
Really good, guys.
Bye, guys.